I kept thinking I was being a good wife. No, a great wife. I was trying so hard to be sweet, quiet, respectful, adaptable, and accommodating. All the things the church said makes me godly. But behind all of that niceness was a heart that was terrified. I wasn't walking in kindness or wisdom, and it certainly wasn't shrewdness by any stretch of the imagination. If you're a nice wife, that means in order to avoid conflicts in your marriage, it's you who's always smoothing things over. What if your niceness isn't helping your marriage, but actually hindering it and damaging you? And what if it's the very thing keeping your husband from growing and keeping you stuck in a version of your marriage that's draining your soul? For so many Christian wives, being the excellent wife has been translated into being nice. But niceness comes from fear, not faith. Niceness is what kept me quiet instead of speaking the truth. Hi there, I'm Lillian. Welcome to my channel. Here I help Christian wives heal their femininity so they can stop thinking like sons of God and start embodying their lives like His daughters. I talk about my own journey and how healing my feminine heart led me to the discovery that I was married to a type 3 man. That's the type of man that's a Nabal. If you don't know if you're married to a type 1, 2, or a 3 husband, you can find a link for that in the description box. Do you want to learn how to understand God's Word as a woman, heal yourself by His sanctification, and possibly transform your marriage by faith and knowledge? Then this is the place for you. Well, hello there. Welcome back to Shrewd Wife Life. Today we're diving into the topic of being nice to your husband. For a lot of us in the Christian marriage space, when you hear the words submission, respect, and love, what that really means is be nice to your husband. My takeaway for a lot of years was that submission and respect, that niceness, was the secret sauce that would make your marriage perfect. But you know what I've learned the hard way? Niceness and kindness aren't the same thing. What if I told you that niceness, this constant need to please a man, or thinking that you're the one who's got to keep the peace or to be his peace, that kind of thought process is what leads you straight into a trap where you'll not only end up enabling sin, but compromising your own God-given truth, and that it will even lead you into idolatry. I can confirm that if your heart stays unhealed, niceness will lead you headlong into idolatry. And with this video, I'm hoping to help you avoid that. Let's talk about it. I want to start with what I call the niceness trap in marriage. It means you're the one collapsing in on yourself. You're the one that allows your desire to please your husband to not just override your needs occasionally. I'm not just talking about always eating at a burger place because he likes it, but you'd prefer seafood. And I'm not talking about watching action movies when you'd prefer a rom-com. I'm talking about something much worse. I'm talking about handing over your God-given discernment, one slow, quiet surrender at a time. I'm talking about your voice becoming smaller and your convictions starting to blur into his. Not because he demands it, at least not overtly, but because somewhere along the way, you've been conditioned to believe that being an excellent wife and becoming one flesh in marriage means your feminine autonomy and all the power and strength that goes with it has to disappear. That's the niceness trap. A lot of Christian wives, and I know this because I was one of them for a long time, we've been conditioned into this kind of niceness through words like submission and respect. It's an ideology that says a godly wife has the responsibility to keep the peace at any cost. I say ideology because that's what it is. It's a framework that Christian wives have accepted without even realizing it. And the framework tells them what's bad or good, what her role is and what's expected of her. But the thing is, God doesn't stipulate any of those things in His Word. These are all man-made constructs, which is how ideologies are created. There's a feminine reciprocity that's imperative in marriage, but it can't flow naturally inside structured boxes of codes and rules like what you'd find in that ideology. So without that natural response to masculine initiation, all the wife's left with is a fetish of male dominance that's enabled by codependence. On the outside, submission and respect sound biblical. But behind closed doors, when your heart is unhealed, what gets lived out is people-pleasing that appears like righteousness. I've got a video where I talk about the depth of what happens when wives are conditioned to believe that submission and respect are the magic solution to every problem in their marriage. And that video should be appearing in the iCards right now. When you're being too nice, what you find yourself doing is always thinking about meeting other people's expectations and doing a lot of things you don't really want to do just to keep them happy and accepting you, or we do those things to avoid conflict. This type of niceness is rooted in the fear of displeasing a husband, or the fear of making him unhappy, or the fear that he will stop loving you, which is the saddest and the one that causes the most damage in your soul. When a woman is unhealed, we end up taking the verse, do unto others, to a complete, unrealistic, self-sacrificing, and even dangerous level when it comes to marriage. We say yes when we really mean no, and we do that so we don't have to feel the loneliness that happens in rejection when we disagree with a husband. If you've seen this pattern in yourself, I want to pause here and say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry if you were ever taught, like I was, that being a good wife meant disappearing. I'm sorry if anyone ever made you feel like speaking up or having needs made you less godly. That message isn't from Him, and I carried it too. But I want you to know that you can still say no and be kind while you're saying it. Proverbs 31 verse 26 says, "She opens her mouth with wisdom. A lesson of kindness is on her tongue." In this proverb, she's not teaching a lesson about kindness. Her demeanor and countenance are the lesson. She embodies kindness, not niceness. I believe that there's nothing you can't say and say it with kindness. That's the spiritual truth that Paul's talking about in Ephesians 4 verse 15. He says, "Speak the truth in love so that you'll grow up into Christ-likeness." I know this might seem obvious, but it wasn't to me. I learned it like a revelation. You don't wait until you're mature to speak the truth in love perfectly. Doing it is how you become mature. Speaking the truth in love requires a willingness to take responsibility for yourself through stewardship. It requires humility, courage, and a feminine strength. You might not have all of that in spades yet, but you can the more you speak the truth in love. When we don't learn to do that, we can really do some serious damage to ourselves. Here's how that happens. When a wife consistently neglects her needs and the truth about those needs in order to keep her husband comfortable and happy, it begins a devastatingly deterioration of her soul. For the feminine heart, this constant self-sacrifice of collapsing in on herself leads to deep feelings of disconnection and a loss of her authentic self, which leads to resentment. God didn't give His daughter a feminine soul in order for her to disregard it because she got married. It was so that she could discover her true identity in Him, not a man. A wife who's too nice, she's gonna start to slowly lose her identity and voice as God's own daughter. Eventually, Her worth gets rerouted through the value she provides in her skills as a wife. This increases resentment because she feels as if her only value is in how well she can keep her husband happy and at peace. Did you notice that? The value from the skills of doing the job of the wife gets superimposed over top of her worth as God's daughter. The longer she sits in this upside down paradigm, the more her feminine identity gets diminished. Another thing is that it's also not really helpful for her husband either. When a man is constantly shielded from the truth of who he is and what God expects of him, and he's never held accountable for choices that are selfish or even sinful, his masculine heart stays underdeveloped. And that's the nature of masculinity. When it's not challenged, it's quite happy to sit in the status quo of life, which is the reason God said it's not good that man's alone. So instead of growing in strength and integrity as the leader of the home and the head in the relationship, he stays in a space that feels comfy and requires little to nothing from him. And without realizing it, the wife's niceness can become a kind of insulation. It doesn't cause his lack of growth, but it contributes to it by removing the kind of relational tension that God intended by creating his daughter so that his son would be required to rise up and lead and invest. And so the more he stays comfortable, the more space he starts to take up, not just in the home, but in your thought life, your energy, and your internal world. In your niceness, you start to shrink to make room for him, because that's what femininity does. It responds and adapts in order to please. What I'm talking about is you feeling small because he's taking up too much space in the relationship. If you're experiencing this dynamic, it means his masculinity isn't providing enough space for your femininity. Your feminine embodiment will take up space. It's supposed to. That's why God created estrogen. I would say that estrogen is even supposed to take up more space than testosterone. In Proverbs 4, verse 23, God tells us to guard our hearts diligently. The diligent guarding and discipline and tending that's required for the feminine heart isn't just different, it's way more complex and intense than a man's. And that's why God put the expectation on masculinity to support femininity and to invest in it. Okay, so let's look at some differences between niceness and kindness. So many of us believe that being nice is just a different flavor or tone of the word kind, but it's not. Your niceness isn't defined by you. It's defined by the expectations that others have placed on you. When we're operating from niceness, there's a high probability that we're doing things we don't want to truly do or even agree with. A lot of times, what we're trying to do is not make others uncomfortable, even if it costs us our own peace and, in a lot of cases, our self-respect and our authenticity. How does niceness get fleshed out in a marriage? When it comes to communication, like true communication, there isn't any. Well, logistics happen. The day-to-day surface planning, like doctor's appointments and piano recitals, vet appointments, or paying the bills. But never when it's a hard subject or awkward situations. So although there's no real communication, it looks like there is. And niceness can also make a marriage sound really one-sided. Instead of the freedom to voice what you think and feel, you end up quietly hiding thoughts and swallowing back any words that might start a fight. In order for you to be nice, you've got to downplay or completely neglect your own desires so that you don't appear to be too needy or too inconvenient. Being nice is rooted in fear, not love. It stops any healing or growth inside you, and it kills true friendship in the relationship. Niceness as an action verb means that nice acts are practiced from a place of uncertainty and fear of rejection and self-abandonment. And these are all the places inside you that are unhealed, so they're still fractured and hurting. Kindness isn't an action verb. It's a verb that describes a state of being. It's an embodiment that comes from a place of strength and wholeness. When you're healed, your kindness comes from knowing that your worth in God's eyes overrides the value of your husband's opinion. You can take ownership of that truth without any fear of rejection, because at the end of the day, it's the fear of God that matters more. Embodying kindness from that place is way more powerful than acting nice because of fear. That truth is so important to know, because when you heal and embody real kindness, that means you're going to challenge your husband. And it's not rebellion. It's the way God designed you. Don't let anyone tell you something else. That Christian ideology of marriage that we talked about earlier, it wants you to believe that you were created only as an Azer, but you weren't. You were also created to be a Kenedgo, Genesis 2:18. That means standing in opposition to him when something doesn't feel safe, right, aligned, or godly. Rashi, the Jewish commentator who is the guy when it comes to Torah study, he says that Genesis 2:18 means if a husband is worthy, his wife will be a helper. But if he's unworthy, she'll be against him. And here's the thing that's really important. And if there's only one thing that you take away in this video, let it be this. Unless your heart is healed, you will not be able to walk in that Kednego authority. In all transparency, I defaulted to niceness every time because deep in my heart, I was still full of fear. It didn't matter how many Bible studies I did on fear, how many sermons I heard at church, or how many powerful affirmations and verses I memorized. I couldn't just force myself to stop feeling afraid by white-knuckling it. You know why I couldn't do it? Because that's what Jesus came to do. When you cooperate with him in your healing, it's him who conquers the fear for you. Luke 4, verse 18. And when that healing happens, and you begin walking in your marriage through your Kednego design, your heart doesn't sit in a capitulating position and meekly whisper to your husband, please don't hurt my feelings anymore. Please do the right thing. Please love me. No. When a woman's femininity is healed and integrated, her heart embodies the truth of God's word, where he says, you will love my daughter, or you'll feel the tension and spiritual consequence of what happens when you don't. 1 Peter 3, verse 7. If we stay unhealed, what we end up doing is completely misunderstanding submission and respect, which means we end up feeling a compulsion to be nice, and that happens to the point of enabling. When Christian wives submit and respect in an unhealed condition, what we do is we inadvertently eliminate all the friction and tension that's supposed to naturally surface in relationships. So we end up tolerating the most unhealthy dynamic in marriage. The reason bad behavior from a man can continue in the face of niceness is because bad behavior can bulldoze right over it. Niceness doesn't have any power, not like kindness does. Kindness has the strength to call out the truth of sin and do it in a spirit of love. I know this because I did it. I got it all completely wrong and mixed up and backwards. I was so consumed with having a better marriage and getting everything just right and being that nice, excellent wife that I ended up putting a human relationship ahead of my relationship with God. I had placed a man where only God should have been, and I served him with fearful devotion. I thought that was submission. I kept thinking I was being a good wife. I was trying so hard to be sweet and respectful and adaptable and accommodating. All the things that the church said was a nice, godly wife. But behind all of that niceness, I was terrified. I wasn't walking in kindness or wisdom, and it certainly wasn't shrewdness by any stretch. Instead, I was shrinking into silence so Dean wouldn't get angry or reject me. I leaned on him for my identity, and I waited on him for my worth. I gave him the kind of emotional space and spiritual access that only belonged to God. I feared Dean's rejection and the failure of marriage more than I feared the awesomeness of God. You know, if I'm honest, the part that still makes me a little queasy is that I didn't even see that I was idolizing marriage and a man and calling it submission. Not until God, in all his mercy, let me experience the full weight of what I was doing. He didn't humiliate me, he humbled me. And it was in that moment of realizing that I had been spiritually unfaithful to God that his grace came flooding in. It didn't punish me. I felt rescued. The very sin that should have disqualified me, that became the place that he started healing me. Luke 4:18 wasn't just a verse anymore. It became a reality. Not just truth, a reality. God showed me that the wound underneath my fear wasn't really about marriage or even Dean. It was about the deep wound in my soul that had never been healed because I had covered it with fear. It was the ache of an unidentified identity. When you're brokenhearted, you can do your best to integrate yourself, but it cannot be done right. Allowing God to heal that little girl is how my integration began to happen and how my fear disappeared. I didn't drive away the fear. I allowed Jesus to heal me, and he drove it away. Another name for extreme niceness is people-pleasing. I've also heard it referred to as the disease to please, although I can't remember where I heard that. You know you're experiencing it by how your body responds. Whenever you express your own needs or desires, especially when they're inconvenient or when you disagree with your husband, do you feel like you're being negative, difficult, or even bad? How about when you advocate for yourself or speak an emotional truth that you feel? Does it bring a feeling of guilt, like you're doing something wrong or selfish? That's a sign of people-pleasing, and it's rooted in unhealed trauma, not sin or anything you've done wrong. You, sister, aren't called to please anyone. You're called to walk in truth. Galatians 1, verse 10. This feeling of never being good enough, unless you're always living in self-sacrifice of marriage, it gnaws away at your femininity with the sense that ties your worth to how happy you can keep your husband, even if it costs you your own personality and peace. In a healthy marriage, not a perfect one, but a healthy one, a daughter of God is just as free to express her needs and requirements, yes, even requirements, as a son of God is. And she's free to do it without the fear of being labeled as selfish, needy, disrespectful, or unsubmissive. To wrap up, I want to invite you to consider if you're living from authentic kindness or if you've been trapped like I was in the niceness mindset. It's a hard ask, isn't it? I know it is. But if you're open to it, you might start to see that you are actually trapped in it and that it's been costing you some important parts of your autonomy, your voice, your truth, and the ability to guard your own heart. If that's happened to you, then sister, I pray you let the Lord show you where you need to start. Because once you do, I guarantee you, it will open doors in your relationship with God that will take you to levels with Him that you did not know existed. The difference between niceness and kindness isn't just about your tone of voice or how you express yourself. It's about where they're sourced from. The niceness act comes from you. It's attached to the fear inside of you. But kindness comes from the Holy Spirit as He heals you. Your source for kindness comes from Him alone. And that's why kindness is so powerful and niceness is so not. And here's where things get even more interesting. When you start to make that shift away from niceness towards kindness, the way your husband responds to that change is going to tell you a lot about the kind of man he is. In part 2, I'm going to show you what happens when you start to make the move from niceness towards kindness and how the two very different types of husbands respond when that shift happens. Some men are inspired by your peace. It resonates with their masculinity. They're inspired to change and grow. But the other type of man, he'll get more agitated by it. And that tells you everything you need to know about him. Thank you for watching until the end. Time is our most important commodity, and I'm so grateful that you chose to spend yours here with me. If a part of today's message resonated with you, or if you have a thought that might encourage another sister, feel free to share it below. Every comment, every like, and share helps get this message out to more women who are ready to heal their feminine heart. Bye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.